So a few months ago, Casio released an absolute banger of a chronograph, the EFB-109D. I mean, just look at it. Complete strap monster. Look much more expensive than it was. And it seems they haven't stopped there, because what I should have in here is like a follow-up to that watch, and essentially a non-chronograph version, or at least that's what it looks like. So yeah, I ordered one. Let's take a look, see how it stacks up to the previous one, eh? Now, I'll leave a link to this watch in the video description. I purchased this one on Amazon. I think it was about £100, but prices do vary significantly on grey market sites like Amazon. And here is the code name, which is EFB-109D. And it's another one of these edifice watches, as you can see here, which tend to be the best Casio watches as of late, especially when it comes to analog watches. But yeah, what are we waiting for? Let's take a look at this, eh? See if it looks as good as the previous one. Oh, wow. Okay. So this is quite a bit different than I expected. So here's your first look at it, the EFB-109D. Now, straight out of the box, one thing that strikes me is the crystal's pretty reflective, or at least it doesn't have any anti-reflective coating. So as you can see, it does glare up quite easily. But aside from that, the watch is quite different than what I was expecting. I mean, it's really thin and quite a different shape to the other watch. I didn't expect it to be so flat at all, really. Now, it does retain some similar characteristics to that previous chronograph. I tried to pick the most similar color that they had available. It's got some similarities in the markers and the hands, but other elements like this case, not only is it quite thin, but it's also got quite different brushing. This has like a barrel-shaped case with radial brushing that seems to come out from the center. And this one's also an integrated bracelet watch. Now, the bracelet itself looks very comparable to that on loads of these other Casio Edifice watches, perhaps a tiny bit better. I think with the last version, these were actually solid steel links, and that could well be the case here, yeah. So you might see others that look like this, but this is actually slightly better than most, I think. And yeah, that bracelet is removable too. Thought for a second that that may not be the case, because they are very rigid, those end links. They don't have any give whatsoever, so I thought maybe they were molded into the case, but no, you can remove those. And if you're interested, it's an odd size there. I mean, that measures about 11.8, so maybe they're about 12 millimeters, so it may have to be a custom strap job for that one. I think this watch is pretty good looking though. Not sure it's quite as good looking as the chronograph version, but nonetheless, I think it's fairly attractive. This one is the black. I think it comes in at least 2 other colorways. As for specs on this one, what have we got aside from that sapphire crystal? We've got a stainless steel case, which this definitely is. Quite simplistic case finishing. You never tend to find anything too elaborate on lower end Casios like this, but overall it's not bad. We also have 100 meters of water resistance, partly thanks to that screw back, but I anticipate this is just a push-pull crown. And of course, like all the other Casios, this is using a quartz movement, as you can see from it ticking along there. I've just held it up to my ear. It is quite quiet. Definitely getting some 70s design cues, I think, there. Looks a little bit like some of the Timex watches we've seen over the past few years. Has that kind of case shape. Does feel a bit larger than some of those. I wouldn't say it's a big watch by any stretch, but watches of this shape always tend to look a bit bigger than the dimensions suggest. And on the Casio site, it says this one's got a width of 38.5, so let's see if that's actually the case, because sometimes these tonneau case shapes fit bigger, but no, it is about 38.5 wide. Lug to lug, if you measure the technical lug to lug, about 43.2, but if you include those semi-fixed end links, it's just shy of 48 mil. Very thin indeed with that flat crystal, 9.3, which is quite thin for a bezeled watch like this. Certainly looks thinner than 9.3, looks more like a 7mm watch, maybe because the sides of the watch are actually a bit thinner than that, and some of the thickness is taken up by this slight protrusion of the case back there. Now, it's hard to get it fully across on camera because, just like with the Citizen Suyoso recently, a bit of that glare does conceal it, but the markers on this look fantastic, just like that previous Edifice watch. I do still wish that Casio would experiment with some more hands though. While this again is probably one of the better watches to accommodate that handset with, it's still not the best. They could definitely improve that element, no doubt. That said, even with the crystal glare and that, I think sapphire is still appreciated by a lot of people. Should be very scratch resistant. Let's see how this fits on my arm. And there's a quick look at it on my 6¼ inch wrist. I think for me, the effective lug-to-lug's probably a little bit long to get away with it on my wrist. It's not a million miles off. I think for most wrists, they'll have no problem with this at all, especially because it's so thin, and it really looks and wears thinner than that, as you can see. I mean, that is like a wafer. Much thinner, actually, than the chronograph version of this watch. And despite showing some similar design cues, looks a fair amount different on wrist. This black version in particular doesn't have the sunburst though, which is one of the things I like the most about the previous one. This is much more of just a flat matte black. And there's a closer look at it on my wrist. Still trying to figure out the lighting in this room, but we are slowly getting there. Brushing's interesting, not the best quality. It's quite coarse brushing, although some of that's probably for effect. Yeah, very flat. I've had a bit of a spree of these ones recently, watches that could be fantastic with a quick crystal swap. That is easier said than done. This one, as you can see, it's not quite as bad on the crystal as the Ciosa. And in fact, I think it actually holds up quite well when the two are side by side, considering that it's a third of the price. At least the quartz avoids the rotundness. Overall impressions for this one are pretty good. Seems to have a fair amount of availability too. I'll link it below. Let me know what you think in the comment section too.